John Dillinger's story. He wasn't a person who just killed people at random. I mean, he wasn't like that kind of a murderer. I mean, he killed people, but it's more like because of them chasing him, being cops, and that kind of thing. He actually was kind of popular with the public as being like almost like a Robin Hood. And so that's where that came from. And it's when you really look into it, it's pretty ridiculous. Another theory was that the black man did it. Which there's a story that there was a fight in the warehouse with Charlie Lawson and a black man, where the black man stabbed Charlie Lawson pretty seriously and put him in the hospital for 2 weeks. And so some people kept positing that theory that that black man came back and killed the family. Come to find out, and I didn't even... I never could find the story in the paper or anything, and the reason why is it was as old as it was when I found out. It really was like almost 10 years before the murder that happened. And so that one came out too. But there's really pretty much nothing to me that points that he didn't do it. That,
yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Were there any actual... even somewhat sound theories of someone else who did it other than, just people throwing out names?
No, I think most people pretty much realize that he did it.
Mm-hmm. But the motive is the real mystery, right?
Yeah, the true motive was always a mystery, and, it's still hard for anyone to say what really he was thinking about. When you read my book, especially The Meaning by Tears, I put my thoughts out there, and I know he had some physical things going on. He was having headaches, really severe headaches. He had some kind of a red rash that was bothering, which might have been, it could have been shingles, it could have been whatever. I mean, something that was bothering him. It was like fiery and painful. So he had the physical things there going on. He evidently was depressed. His wife, Fanny, told people right before the murders about him, finding him out in a field, praying and getting up at night, sitting on the edge of the bed and crying. And whether or not this was like guilt about what was going on with the daughter, or whether he was just severely depressed. His brothers stopped and talked to him one time and was, trying to ask him about things might be wrong, and he just gets up and walks away and walks to the railroad track and won't say anything. It's just really mysterious, what all might have been going on in his mind. And like a week or so before the murders, there was a wake for one of his neighbors that had died, fairly young. It was a woman. And they're standing outside in the cold. It's already very cold, and they had a bonfire. And their men are out there talking about the meaning of life and, life and death. And how people would talk, at a wake. And they warm their hands by the fire, and Charlie Lawson says to some of them, "I wouldn't mind dying if I could just take my family with me." There's just, and then, when they found his body after he killed himself out there in the woods, he had 2 notes on him that were, neither one of them was finished, and one of them said, "No one to blame but." And then there was another one. Gosh, I can't even remember now exactly what it said. But there was like unfinished notes, kind of like acting like he was going to say, something, but he didn't finish. And it's just all really mysterious.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like there's nothing about the whole thing that's complete. All of it's open-ended, and it's all open for interpretation. It's one of those things that we're never going to know the answers to, but You know, one thing I do want to get into, and you touched on it earlier, and I always find this fascinating because, you know, we all have this part inside of us where we're fascinated by things like this. But the tourist attraction aspect of it, how quickly did something like that get going as far as the house and things of that nature, or was it something that didn't come around until much later?
No, this was very quickly brought about. The day of, like I said, you know, they didn't really keep people that much away. And that evening of the murders in the twilight, there was many people around there. And then the next day, you know, people from the area started coming. They were curious. The one gentleman we interviewed a couple people that had seen the murder scene that day, but that one, the 12-year-old that we interviewed many years later, he was there talking, and then people, and he talked about people while he was there were coming. They were picking up rocks. They were digging up trees. They were punching stuff out of the sides of the house. They were going in the house. You know, they were having to try to keep them out. I mean, this is before the murder scene's even cleaned up. And then in the days following, I mean, literally in that next couple days, there were hundreds of people coming. And so the person responsible for the property, and you have one 16-year-old son left alive, and he's devastated because his entire family has been wiped out. So his uncle Marion, who's a younger brother of the murderer, he's like at his wit's end. The farm's not paid for. There's a $500 note due on it. Back then, that's a whole lot of money for that year. And you have Arthur, the son. He's not in any shape at 16 years old to run that farm, to make it pay for itself. He's mentally not doing well. So you have Marion Lawson there going, we can't stop these people from coming. They're carrying everything off. And you just physically couldn't stop them from coming. And what actually happened was he was in town, according to his daughter, Stella Lawson Bowles, and talking to some people about it. And some of them, one of them was a mail carrier, and I think one of them was a preacher in the area, were talking to him, and they said, why don't you just fence the place off and charge admission? And at first he was like, I can't do that, make money off of a murder in my family. And then he goes back and talks to his and Charlie Lawson's mother, Nancy Lawson, and some of them, and they come up with the idea that might be about the only thing that they were going to be able to do. I mean, you couldn't stop people from coming. And so they fenced it off, and literally within, you see the local newspaper writing about them fencing it off and charging admission within a week of the murders. So they had it, you know, cordoned off, and people were beginning to come through. And eventually, you know, there was lots of talk about people pulling the raisins off that raisin cake. That raisin cake was very famous. And then he ended up buying a glass container to put it inside. But they left that house just as it was. Just everything just as it was left the day of the murders, with the blood on the pillows. The pillows were laying there. They roped it off and let you walk through in groups, and then they let the ropes down and you could walk around in the house, and then they called the group back and they went out the back door. Then the tour went up to where his body was found, past the tobacco barn where the little girls were found, and it had signs and things, so it was just a whole tour. And but it was done very quickly after that. And a lot of people very critical of Marion Lawson for doing that. But once you really get to thinking about it, what was he going to do? You know, how was he going to pay that farm off for that 16-year-old nephew? And how was he going to protect everything there to keep people from just carrying the whole place away. And that's what he decided to do. And it was not popular with the family. A lot of them thought, this is not the thing to do. But the more I thought about it and more I talked to different people, I really feel like he was kind of in a corner, as to what he was going to do. He had to pay for the farm, and evidently it made a lot of money. And it went on. It was open probably, I want to say it must have been open about 4 or 5 years.
One of the reasons why talking to you is so important about something like this is because you went through the investigation. You did the things on your own, whereas a lot of people can piggyback on your work. But it's nice to talk to someone who was there for so many new things that were coming out that people weren't aware of before. And what I wanted to know about was because I'm trying to put myself in your shoes mentally here. And any time that I get deep into a subject, and I do this every month on this show. Once a month we do a show like this. None maybe more so than disturbing than this one. So,
right.
If I'm in your shoes and I'm finding all this stuff out for the first time, I have to tell you there's some sleepless nights. How did it affect you as things were kind of piling up in your head even?
Well, yeah, it gets you. You try to separate yourself, but I always said during the time, there was about 3 years that we worked together, my father and I, on White Christmas, Bloody Christmas, and then I just about didn't go back to it. After that book came out and everything that we went through, some of the family was so upset that it was brought back up again, and we were writing about it, and then we also brought the scandal out. It was just very unpopular with some of them. We got death threats, and it's just really hard. And two, I did everything for both of these books by myself. There's, when you see the publishing name, it's really me behind it all, doing almost everything for it. And so it really takes an emotional toll. And I remember, the first 3 years or so writing to get the first book out, I said it's like the Lawson family moved in the house with me. They're like in your thoughts. They kind of consume, trying to figure it out. And, when you're starting, it's like a big giant jigsaw puzzle, and you try to put it together and make it make sense. And some people tell you things, and you go, that doesn't make sense. Does this really fit in with it? And you try to fit it in with everything else you've heard to make sure that it all seems reasonable and that you're telling it right. And you also feel like you have a responsibility to the story and a responsibility to the victims and even a responsibility to the murderer, that you don't, if he didn't do it, figure out that he didn't. And so they kind of move in with you, and if that makes sense, and they seem almost like they're living with you. But I have had people ask me, was I haunted by them, or I have never felt haunted, or like they would disturb me, or that they had some evil toward me, or I never have felt that way. In my mind, I feel like they know that all I was trying to do was tell their story truthfully. And it's not to be good, bad, right, or wrong, just to tell what happened as best that I could.
It's good you brought that up, because, what other people think whenever, people get into these true crime subjects is always fascinating to me, because like, just because you're interested in the subject doesn't mean you are the subject, and that's what I think people struggle with sometimes is, I'm fascinated by the Lawson family murder. Doesn't mean I condone what happened, but it's an interesting part of history. So, I don't know what your friends and family were like at the time, but was there anybody that was acting towards you like you were strange for wanting to be so fascinated by a subject like this?
Well, I don't know. I can't remember who might have said it, but there was times that people seemed to think that my father was, quote unquote, obsessed with the story. He really was extremely interested in it and really had a drive to try to figure out what happened. And that kind of came from him.